If you are dealing with a narcissist, the first thing you need to understand is that they are not interacting with you the way most people do. You naturally believe that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, fairness, honesty, and understanding. That belief helps create meaningful human connections. A narcissist, however, often sees relationships through a completely different lens. Their focus is not on working together. Their focus is on gaining control. In almost every interaction, their goal is to secure power, admiration, validation, and influence on their own terms. If they need to bend the truth, they will do it. If they need to confuse you until you question your own memory, they will not hesitate. If they believe damaging your confidence will make you easier to influence, they may continue doing exactly that without feeling genuine remorse. This is what makes these relationships so emotionally exhausting. Many people believe that if they stay kind enough, patient enough, or explain themselves clearly enough, the narcissist will finally understand. Sadly, that hope usually leads to disappointment. A narcissist rarely changes because of logic, heartfelt conversations, or emotional appeals alone. They usually respond only when their behavior has real consequences. Ignoring this truth often leads to constant frustration, growing self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion. So before you invest more energy trying to fix the relationship, ask yourself one simple question. Are you believing repeated promises, or are you paying attention to repeated behavior? Stay with this thought because understanding this single difference can completely change the way you protect your peace. The next step is learning to trust actions more than words. This is one of the biggest turning points for anyone trying to understand narcissistic behavior. A narcissist can sound incredibly convincing. They may promise that everything will be different. They may apologize with convincing emotion. They may even describe themselves as the true victim of every conflict. Their words can sound exactly like what you have been hoping to hear for months or even years. But the real question is never what they say. The real question is what they repeatedly do. Patterns reveal character far better than promises ever will. If dishonesty keeps returning, if disrespect becomes a habit, or if manipulation appears again and again, then that repeated behavior is showing you the truth. Words without consistent action have very little value. One of the easiest mistakes people make is allowing a beautiful apology to erase months of harmful behavior. But lasting change is visible. It is steady. It continues over time. It is not simply announced with emotional speeches. Watch what happens after the conversation ends. Watch how they respond when they do not get what they want. Watch how they behave when nobody else is watching. Their daily actions tell the real story. This can be difficult to accept because hope often encourages us to focus on rare positive moments instead of repeated negative patterns. Yet real clarity comes when you stop listening only with your heart and begin observing with calm awareness. Keep watching because the next psychological tactic explains why so many intelligent people slowly begin questioning their own reality without even realizing it. One of the most damaging strategies used by narcissists is gaslighting. It is a subtle form of psychological manipulation designed to make you lose confidence in your own thoughts, memories, and experiences. They may strongly deny saying something you clearly remember hearing. They may insist that an event happened differently, even when you know exactly what took place. Over time, they slowly rewrite the story until you begin wondering if your own memory can really be trusted. Eventually, you may find yourself apologizing for situations that were never your responsibility. That is exactly how this tactic gains power. The more you defend yourself, explain yourself, or try to prove your point, the deeper you become trapped inside their version of reality. Every endless argument keeps the attention on their agenda instead of the real issue. They choose the topic. They change the rules. They control the direction of every conversation. Before long, you are spending more time defending yourself than protecting your own peace. This constant mental confusion slowly drains your confidence. It becomes harder to trust your instincts because every conversation leaves you second-guessing yourself. Healthy relationships bring greater clarity over time. Manipulative relationships create increasing confusion. That difference matters. If you constantly leave conversations feeling uncertain about what actually happened, do not ignore that feeling. Your inner awareness deserves attention. And there is another tactic that can become even more emotionally addictive because it keeps hope alive just long enough to prevent people from walking away. Another common strategy is called intermittent reinforcement. It works by mixing moments of kindness with periods of emotional pain in completely unpredictable ways. This pattern becomes incredibly powerful because it activates the same psychological process that keeps many addictions alive. If someone treated you badly every single day, leaving would eventually become much easier. But when hurtful behavior is followed by unexpected affection, your mind begins waiting for the next good moment. You start believing that if you say the right thing, behave perfectly, or become more understanding, those loving moments will return more often. That hope keeps many people emotionally attached long after the relationship has become unhealthy. Instead of enjoying a secure relationship, they begin chasing brief moments of warmth that disappear almost as quickly as they arrive. Those rare moments feel valuable because they are unpredictable, not because they are genuine signs of lasting change. The cycle repeats itself over and over. Pain is followed by comfort. Distance is followed by affection. Confusion is followed by temporary relief. Before long, the relationship feels impossible to leave because your emotions have become tied to waiting for the next reward. But real love does not require you to earn basic respect. Healthy relationships provide consistency instead of emotional gambling. If peace only appears for a short time before the same harmful behavior returns, that pattern deserves your full attention. And there is one final tactic that often completes this cycle by shifting responsibility away from the narcissist and placing it directly onto you. Projection is another powerful method narcissists often use to protect their own image. Instead of facing their own flaws, they accuse other people of the very behaviors they are displaying themselves. They may call you dishonest while they are hiding the truth. They may accuse you of being controlling while they are trying to control every situation. They may describe you as selfish while ignoring your needs completely. This tactic creates confusion because you naturally begin defending yourself instead of noticing what is really happening. The conversation moves away from their actions and becomes centered on proving your innocence. That shift is exactly what they want. It allows them to avoid accountability while placing emotional pressure on you. Over time, this repeated pattern can leave you feeling responsible for problems you did not create. The healthiest response is not endless arguing. It is calm observation, strong personal boundaries, and trust in consistent behavior rather than emotional performances. You cannot force someone to become honest if they refuse to examine themselves. You cannot heal another person's refusal to accept responsibility. What you can do is protect your own peace, trust your own experiences, and recognize unhealthy patterns before they steal more of your emotional energy. Remember this, because it may be the most important lesson of all. The more clearly you see repeated behavior, the less power manipulation has over your life. That awareness is where real freedom begins. And once you truly understand it, your choices become stronger than their control. When a narcissist is being dishonest, they often accuse you of lying. If they are emotionally unstable, they may insist that you are the one acting irrationally. This tactic serves two powerful purposes at the same time. First, it shifts all attention away from their own behavior. Second, it keeps you busy defending yourself instead of noticing what is actually happening. The more you explain, the more control they quietly gain over the conversation. Learning these patterns is not about becoming suspicious of everyone you meet. It is about seeing situations with clear eyes instead of through wishful thinking. Once you recognize the pattern, everything begins to change. You stop reacting automatically. You stop getting pulled into endless circles that never lead anywhere. Most importantly, you stop playing the role they expect from you. And when you refuse to play that role, much of their influence disappears. If you truly want to stop feeling manipulated, emotionally drained, and constantly confused, the first step is simple. See the narcissist as they consistently behave, not as the person you keep hoping they will become. Truth can sometimes be painful, but it is always more valuable than comforting illusions. Keep listening because this next idea explains why so many caring people unknowingly hand over their emotional power without realizing it. One of the deepest traps people fall into is chasing a narcissist's approval. This does not always look obvious. It often appears in small daily habits. You change your words to avoid criticism. You stay silent to prevent conflict. You work harder hoping they will finally appreciate your effort. You keep trying to earn the respect that should have been freely given in the first place. This happens because every human being naturally wants acceptance and connection. Whether in family, friendship, or romantic relationships, we expect honesty, appreciation, and mutual respect. We believe that if we communicate clearly, remain loyal, and continue showing kindness, eventually the other person will understand. Unfortunately, this rarely happens with a narcissist. They do not see your patience as strength. They often see it as proof that they can keep pushing your limits. Every time you sacrifice your own comfort just to avoid upsetting them, you quietly reinforce their control. Every moment you wait for their approval, you place your self-worth in their hands. That is exactly where they want it. The standards never stop moving. Just when you think you have finally done enough, another demand appears. Another criticism follows. Another impossible expectation replaces the last one. If this sounds familiar, stay with me because the next realization changes everything. The most important truth to remember is this. Their inability to respect you is not evidence that you lack value. It reflects their own unresolved psychological struggles. Beneath the confident appearance many narcissists present is a fragile sense of identity that depends heavily on constant praise, admiration, and control. Admitting mistakes feels unbearable because it threatens the image they have carefully created. Allowing someone else to shine feels uncomfortable because they fear losing their position of importance. As a result, they often manipulate, minimize, criticize, or take advantage of people around them simply to protect their own fragile self-image. Once you truly understand this, your direction becomes much clearer. Emotional distance becomes necessary. Mental distance becomes healthy. Physical distance, whenever possible, becomes even more valuable. It all begins by making one important decision. Stop looking for their approval. This does not mean becoming cruel or seeking revenge. It simply means stepping away from the emotional drama they constantly invite you into. Imagine how much energy you recover when you stop trying to convince someone who has already decided not to understand you. That shift alone can completely change your peace of mind. And what comes next may be the hardest lesson of all. Detaching from a narcissist often means refusing to justify yourself. Narcissists thrive on arguments because arguments prove that they still occupy space inside your thoughts. The moment you begin defending every decision, every choice, or every intention, the discussion stops being about reality and starts revolving around their distorted version of you. They are no longer searching for truth. They are collecting material they can use later. This is why endless explanations rarely solve anything. If they twist your words, allow them to believe what they choose. If they misunderstand your intentions, you do not have to spend hours correcting every false assumption. Their opinion is not your responsibility. Another difficult step is letting go of the hope for perfect closure. Most people long for one final conversation where everything is acknowledged, mistakes are admitted, and genuine apologies are offered. With the narcissist, that ending often never arrives. Waiting for it only keeps you emotionally connected to the same unhealthy cycle. Real closure is something you create yourself. It comes when you stop expecting them to provide healing they are unable or unwilling to give. It comes from accepting reality instead of chasing a fantasy. Keep watching because there is one final mindset that completely changes where your confidence comes from. Perhaps the greatest transformation happens when you stop allowing another person's opinion to define your worth. If you have spent years adjusting your personality just to gain approval from someone who could never truly appreciate you, now is the time to reclaim that power. Your value does not depend on their recognition. It never did. Genuine confidence grows from within, not from someone else's praise or acceptance. The moment you understand this, the narcissist loses one of the strongest forms of control they ever had over you. Many people believe that being endlessly patient, endlessly fair, and endlessly understanding will eventually change the relationship. But this belief rests on a false assumption. Healthy people value fairness. Healthy people listen to reason. Healthy people search for solutions. A narcissist is often focused on something very different. Winning becomes more important than understanding. Control becomes more important than connection. That is why your constant efforts to explain, defend, and seek fairness may actually convince them that they still have influence over your emotions. They see continued engagement as proof that you remain emotionally invested in their game. The greatest freedom comes when you quietly step off that playing field altogether. Once you stop needing them to validate your reality and begin trusting your own, everything changes. Their power fades, your confidence grows, and for the first time in a long while, your peace belongs entirely to you. You must stop responding in the exact way a narcissist expects. You must stop giving them the emotional reactions they constantly look for. This is one of the most important truths to understand. Narcissists rarely build genuine emotional stability from within themselves. Their confidence, identity, and sense of importance often depend on how much attention, control, or emotional energy they can pull from other people. That is why they frequently create arguments, stir up unnecessary drama, or provoke emotional reactions where none should exist. Every conflict keeps you connected, and to them, that connection often feels like control. If you want to weaken their influence over your life, you must remove the emotional fuel they rely on. That begins with learning emotional detachment. This does not mean pretending you have no feelings or burying your emotions. It means developing the ability to stay calm even when someone is trying to push your buttons. It means recognizing that guilt trips, unfair accusations, and endless arguments are often attempts to pull you back into a cycle that benefits them, not you. Stay with this, because the next idea may completely change how you respond in future conversations. One of the most useful approaches is often called the gray rock method. The idea is simple but powerful. You become as emotionally neutral, predictable, and uninteresting as possible during necessary interactions. Narcissists usually feed on strong emotional responses. It does not matter whether those emotions are anger, sadness, frustration, excitement, or even affection. Any intense reaction tells them they still have access to your emotions. But when you refuse to react the way they expect, something important happens. Their usual tactics lose much of their effect. Without emotional rewards, many of their attempts at manipulation become far less satisfying. Of course, this is much easier to understand than it is to practice. Remaining calm while someone deliberately provokes you takes patience and self-control. Listening to unfair accusations without rushing to defend yourself feels unnatural. Watching someone twist facts or rewrite events without jumping into another exhausting argument requires tremendous discipline. Yet every unnecessary battle keeps the unhealthy cycle alive. Every attempt to convince someone who has already decided not to listen only drains more of your emotional energy. Real freedom begins the moment you stop feeling responsible for correcting every false story they create. Keep watching, because this next shift is where true emotional strength begins. This kind of emotional discipline grows from a powerful change in mindset. You begin telling yourself that you do not need this person's approval in order to know your own value. You no longer feel responsible for changing their opinion or fixing every misunderstanding they create. You stop measuring your worth by whether they finally admit you were right. Once that happens, something remarkable changes inside you. You become far more difficult to manipulate because your emotional center is no longer controlled by their reactions. A narcissist can only keep control when they can still trigger your emotions on demand. If those emotional buttons stop working, much of their influence disappears. In many situations, the strongest response is not anger or revenge. It is quiet indifference. When they realize their usual tactics no longer produce the emotional reaction they expect, they often lose interest because the reward they were seeking is no longer available. That moment is not about defeating them. It is about reclaiming yourself. Your peace becomes more valuable than proving a point. Your emotional balance becomes stronger than their attempts to disturb it. And once you experience that kind of freedom, it becomes much harder for anyone to pull you back into the same unhealthy cycle. Another major danger is becoming trapped in endless arguments that never reach a real solution. Many people believe that if they explain themselves clearly enough, present enough evidence, or stay patient long enough, the narcissist will finally understand. Unfortunately, that expectation often leads to repeated disappointment. Their purpose is frequently not to discover the truth or build mutual understanding. Their focus is often on maintaining control over the conversation itself. As long as you continue reacting, defending, and trying to prove yourself, you remain involved in a game whose rules constantly change. Think about how these conversations usually unfold. You calmly raise a valid concern about something hurtful, dishonest, or disrespectful that happened. A healthy person may disagree, but they usually try to understand your perspective. A narcissist often responds very differently. Instead of addressing the issue, they quickly change the subject. They remind you of an unrelated mistake from months or even years ago. They twist your words into something you never meant. They shift responsibility back onto you. Before long, the original problem disappears, and suddenly you are the one defending your own character. That shift is exactly what keeps the cycle alive. Pay close attention, because recognizing this pattern is one of the biggest steps toward breaking free. So how do you finally step out of this exhausting pattern? You learn when to disengage. You stop feeling obligated to defend every accusation, explain every decision, or win every argument. That does not mean accepting mistreatment or remaining silent forever. It means refusing to participate in conversations that are designed to confuse, exhaust, and control you. Instead, you begin creating clear, healthy boundaries that are firm and consistent. You decide what behavior you will accept and what behavior you will walk away from. Boundaries are not about controlling another person. They are about protecting your own emotional well-being. A narcissist often depends on emotional chaos to keep others uncertain and off balance. They may continue testing your limits because that has worked before. But when your responses become calm, predictable, and rooted in self-respect, their usual strategies lose much of their strength. Over time, your confidence grows because it no longer depends on winning impossible arguments. It depends on protecting your own peace. And that is the greatest victory of all. The less emotional energy you invest in their constant drama, the more energy you gain to build a life centered on clarity, confidence, and genuine inner freedom.